are going to pick up where we left off in Book 8. So where we're at now is at a point in the discussion where Socrates is talking about the flawed governments, the flawed republics, as it were. So obviously he's just sort of enumerated and anatomized the ideal republic. And in the process of doing so, he hinted at 4 corrupted subtypes of the republic. And this was something that Glaucon pointed out to him and reminded Socrates to tell them about these 4 corrupted republics. And this is a discussion that Socrates has undertaken because I think he's acutely aware of the fact that maintaining harmony is something that you cannot do indefinitely. There's sort of this pattern in nature of deterioration and decay that's essentially unavoidable. And what Socrates is doing, almost like a pathologist, is sort of saying, like, these are the types of necrosis, right? These are the types of degradation that happen from the homeostatic republic. There you go, nice medical analogy. He talked about what he calls the aristocracy, right, which is the ideal homeostatic republic, where the 3 components of the republic are in harmony. And I should add at this point that the 3 components of the republic reflect the 3 components of the soul of the individual. So during Book 8, you're going to see a bouncing between discussions of the constitution of the government, of the city-state that is corrupted, and then the constitution of the individuals who make that up. So again, in a way, Socrates is sort of driving the point home that the city-state, the constitution of the city-state, is an emergent property of the individuals who make it up, which is the entire point of a republic to begin with, because, again, they're trying to define justice. And so if you want to identify a just individual, then you need to create a just society, then narrow back down to the level of the individual. And here what Socrates is doing is now elaborating all the deformities of that homeostatic ideal republic that he talked about in the beginning. So from the aristocracy, which is the ideal republic, he started talking about timocracy, which is a government or really a constitution of a city-state where things have migrated from the virtuous harmony of the aristocracy toward honor-seeking. And so what happens is, little by little, ego aspects start to influence the goings-on within this republic, and the rules that govern the interaction between people start to become strained by essentially honor-seeking and status-seeking. And so what happens gradually is that, to put it in the terms of the soul, is that the rational principle at this point has begun a slow, inexorable yield to the appetites. But it's almost sort of in a rapprochement phase. It's sort of halfway between, because in the timocracy, there is still, I guess, enough shame is the word that I use, for people to want to sort of hide their wealth. They want to hide their luxuries. There's sort of still a desire to present themselves as, more, not like they're not wealth seeking, essentially. And so, but even that process begins to fade over time, and their ability to sort of put up the front of austerity gradually, dissolves. But the timocracy is really a realm where accolades and platitudes and recognition and awards sort of become monetized, essentially, is the way to think of it. It becomes the social currency. And then from that, so the underlying flaw of the timocracy, because although I don't think Socrates intends it this way, I think you can read the different subtypes of the abnormal or defective constitutions as sort of an evolution. You can read them as an evolution, but they need not be. I think you could flow from aristocracy to tyranny, for example, and vice versa. But it's easier to understand the Socratic rationale here is if you follow this as sort of a degradation process from aristocracy to tyranny, with the first step being democracy, essentially an honor-seeking society, with the underlying flaw in this honor-seeking society that slowly, once status-seeking becomes the ostensible goal in this republic, that now clears the path for money itself, just money, wealth, without pretense, becoming the main source of status in the republic. So from that standpoint, now you've laid the groundwork for something called oligarchy. And an oligarchy is one where essentially wealth becomes its own reward. It's a wealth-seeking society where wealth now has quite almost completely eclipsed virtue. It subsumes virtue at this point because wealth, power, and virtue sort of get woven into one in the twisted view of the oligarchic society, to the point where actually having wealth, having money, becomes a de facto qualification for even being considered a citizen. So if you don't have money, you essentially have no influence, you have no say. You're sort of an impoverished employee of this, Republic Inc., for lack of a better term, Republic LLC, a Republic. Anyway, so what happens with oligarchy, and we could talk about this in detail because I think this is where we left off in the last discussion, is that what you have now is a fragmentation process, okay, where in many real and practical ways, in many conceptual and practical ways, the republic is not even a republic anymore. It has now become fragmented, and you're dealing with populations within a group, but now you've got rich, you've got poor, and then that fragmentation can actually, that fracturing process can actually reach deep into demographic and intersectional levels within the populace. And so there's a fracturing process that happens once wealth accumulation becomes a goal for its own sake, because you now have a class of individuals who have achieved the wealth and are only going to accumulate more of it. And then you've got a class of individuals who don't have it and have no hope of achieving it. That's obviously going to lead to strains in the republic after an initial phase of admiration, I think. So, the people that don't have it will sort of look up to the wealthy and, aspire to that, again, because wealth is a subsumed virtue in that regard. But what ends up happening is that the gap between the wealthy and the poor becomes entrenched. And then what festers in this fragmentation is a resentment process. And that's sort of where we left off. Or we started that discussion at the end of the last episode.
I don't know if we got that far into oligarchy. Democratic Republic has people who have storehouses of wealth, and they keep them hidden because, as you said, like shame, they don't want it for people to know about it. But they secretly they like the fact that they have these storehouses of wealth. Then eventually, what they do is the transition from democracy to oligarchy in a republic is when these powerful few who have these storehouses of wealth start changing the laws so that they can now start exhibiting that wealth. And then eventually what happens is then they make it such that everybody can have some wealth, but then they start breaking those laws altogether. That means it's like the capital gains tax and stuff like that, right? Where you can lobby now and suddenly the rich people are getting richer. And
companies are people.
Right, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that is kind of disobeying the law altogether. You create a law that says, everybody has the opportunity to hold on to wealth if they had to, or earn their wealth and hold on to it. And wealth is now the status as opposed to honor in a democratic republic. Wealth is akin to honor. Anybody has access to it. It's based on your ability to be able to get it. But then they create laws such that not everybody has access to it. And not only that, they talk about how inside of this oligarchic republic where the leaders are the wealthy and the poor don't have any representation, there are laws that allow for a person to be able to sell or give away everything they own to another, making themselves completely, I say, without any means at all. And in that situation, they have completely excluded themselves from that republic, from that society. Because since it's a society of money, they have no money, and because they have no money, they have no representation.
Yeah.
And so now we ask ourselves, is this one city or is this in fact two cities? Now it's two cities because one is the city of the wealthy. The second city is the city of the ones without anything, no means.
Right.
And now if you take a city like this and you ask, since it's an oligarchy, you ask yourself who has money quantifiably, who has money, who is wealthy, how many are wealthy, how many are poor. There are very few people who are wealthy, and those people are wealthy and are powerful. And the multitudinous many have no money or don't have enough money, and they are neither powerful nor are they rich. Now that city or that republic is much easier to fall when it's attacked from without, because how are you going to mount a defense? You will have to arm the multitudinous poor, and those, they are not, what is their motivation to fight? And then the oligarchic powerful, they are not enough to fight or put up a resistance. Plus, they are not going to spend any extra resources to try and shore up their defenses because they want to hold on to their money. Each of them would hold on to their money tighter when there's a request to spend in order to defend.
Right.
So that is why this republic, as you can start seeing, starts getting a whole lot weaker than the aristocratic republic where there's unification. And the guardians are protecting the masses. So not for anything else, but because that's the right thing to do, the decree of the rational mind. So it says in here, what is the greatest of all evil? The greatest of all evils in a republic like this is allowing someone to sell all their possessions to someone else or buy them, and then allowing the seller to continue to live in the city while not being any one of its parts, neither the money-making nor the craftsman, nor the cavalryman, nor hoplite, but a poor person without means. Now, if you look at our society right now, the best version of it, right? Not the anarchy or the democratic version, but this is what it's about. A few very rich people and and there's a bunch of people who have no means, and the systems are designed such that the poor remain poor and without any means. I mean, if you look at even just simply, if you just look at the tax rates or taxation, I mean, the wealthiest few pay nothing in tax, in personal income tax. And so, unfortunately, the best version of whatever this republic is is that of an oligarchic republic. Expecting it to be a democratic republic is a dream. Forget about aristocracy. And so I see why Socrates gets cornered by his interlocutors about this fact that this stuff doesn't exist, man. This aristocracy doesn't exist. What I see around and what we see is we see at best oligarchies, at worst anarchy, or tyranny. Yeah. But right now, this is, if I look at society around me, if I look at myself, it comes up later on in this as to how does an oligarchic man come to be? The democratic man wants to be a better man than his father. His father is a philosopher king in a way. And that's what happens once you lose the tempering elements of music and you're just constantly focused on physical training and honor seeking. You think that you're a better man if you're aggressive, and as opposed to somebody who understands rational thinking and understands temperance. Breaking away from temperance leads to democracy, honor seeking. Honor is you cannot be temperate and honor seeking at the same time. Oligarchy is getting rid of temperance together. There is no temperance now. There is two extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And once temperance is gone, all the other virtues inside of the republic are gone, because temperance is the glue that holds everything together, creates order. And there's a statement here that talks about if you have created a society now where there are two parts, there's a rich part and a multitudinous many who are poor, that is when you start noticing crime inside of that city. It says that there's this whole talk about drones and drones as in the bee.
Yeah, so the
drones.
Right.
Yeah.
So the concept of the drone is something that's woven through the entire book 8.
Yep.
And so
Talk about it.
Yeah, so what Socrates is talking about when he invokes the idea of the drone in society. So the drone is somebody who is neither ruler nor servant. Like they don't produce. They simply spend their means, but that is it. So they essentially live a life of functional, perhaps fiscal non-production. And they are only consumers. That's all they do. And it's hard to read book 8 and not be startled by just sort of the rifle shot accuracy Socrates has when he's describing political dynamics that are relevant even today.
Yeah.
He's interweaving massively in a way that I've never read anyone else before, how the economic and the political and the power dynamics all weave together. But all of it from the standpoint of, so what happens is as soon as you abandon your rational principle, the next thing you're going to go for are social indicators of status. And then once that the mystique of that game wears off and this realpolitik kicks in, it's like it's just the outright search for wealth, and then you end up in dynamics where you have concentration and accumulation in one stratum of the population, and then you have a complete exsanguination of financial resources in the other, and everybody's completely blind to the fact that is a problem for the city-state. Because everybody is so fixated on wealth being a good for its own sake.
Yeah.
And that's telling today. I mean, we've got people who have money when you have enough money that you cannot rationally conceive of the number, there's something troubling about that. I mean, it's like, they talk about the fact that the human mind really can't, practically speaking, use the number billion in a useful or meaningful way. And yet, we have people who are like, I have $1 billion. And what does that even mean? Like you're completely unaware of like the level of your own wealth. And what does that mean either as a symptom or as a sign of the state of the society?
It's hard, man. The part about crime, though, he talks about you create these drones who, as you said, are consuming. At least they're not contributing. I don't know if they're necessarily consuming or not. And some of those drones have stings and others are stingless. The stingless ones are he uses the term beggars.
The beggar class, yeah.
And then the ones with sting are the pickpockets, the robbers, and basically things like that. And he says that, which is true, that the presence of such people in the republic is the result of a lack of education, bad rearing, and a bad constitutional system. If we ask ourselves, what do we blame crime on? Right? We say it's socioeconomic. This is 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, lack of education, bad rearing. That means, terrible family dynamics and a bad constitutional system. These are the reasons why there's crime. And there's something to be said about, these problems that we have today are not new. If you organize a bunch of people together and you put them behind a behind a wall and say this is a city now, unfortunately, these are the problems that you come up with. It is not. The only way this works is that every individual has inside of them an ordered republic.
Right.
You cannot impose this on anybody. You see? And that's why I don't think this book is about creating like a republic of city-states. It's about creating an ordered republic inside of your mind.
Right. And it's a very compelling analogy. It's a very instructive one. And so that got me thinking about all of these, corrupted constitution types, the democracy and the oligarchy, because obviously we've been talking a lot about the Republic of the Mind, as you just mentioned. And so to me, I can think of examples in my life where my Republic of the Mind, even though I was completely unaware of it, there's this sort of retrospective, introspective analysis that one can undertake when you read Book 8 of the Republic and being like, oh yeah, there was huge chunks in my life where I was timocratic in nature, whereas like I'm doing this for the accolades. I'm playing the game of platitudes and recognition, and playing the game, as they say. And then I've definitely had situations where I've been an oligarch. I mean, it's where my Republic of the Mind was an oligarchic one. It's sort of like, well, what's going to give me the most amount of money for the least amount of effort, or what's the efficiency here? What's the bottom line? How can I turn this small amount of money into something more? Or how much more can I work? How much time can I spend, generating, RVUs or whatever it is that I've got, to do to meet these benchmarks that are largely self-imposed, and all of them informed either explicitly or implicitly by this idea that, well, more is better because it just is.
Each of these stages, though, now it comes to this, the democratic, how does the oligarchic man come to be? Each of those stages of how a democratic man comes to be, how an oligarchic man comes to be, there's always this theme. I feel that there's this theme of influence from outside.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're right. There's sort of like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's always like there's this crack in the wall kind of thing, and you're letting something in.
Yeah,
right.
That's what happens, because the narrative is, according to Socrates, is that if you've built an ordered republic inside of your mind, you run enough cycles of this, eventually there is a breakdown. And that breakdown occurs in the guardians, the spirited element that keeps the rational element and the auxiliary elements in line. And once that break happens, the reason why we need the guardians is because they protect from faction within, and they also protect from assailing from without.
Right.
And the minute the guardians are getting weaker, the next thing they do is they start paying attention to what other people are saying. So it's the faction within that gets them. And what they start paying attention to is the auxiliary element that tells them, hey man, you guys are great, you guys are guardians, you guys need to have more for yourselves. And so because you do all of this work for the republic, so it's all because you're honorable, you need to be honored for it. And so they go from an aristocratic system where they're doing what they're doing because that's the right thing to do, to doing it because it's the honorable thing to do. And then they start paying more and more attention to this. So then that leads to further perversion. So the look at the difference here. So the masses, or the influencers in this case, of the guardians in a democracy, make the democratic man aware of the fact that the democratic man's father, who was a philosopher king, suffered insult and didn't do anything about it. That he suffered insult in office, or he suffered insult in life, but he didn't do anything about it. And there's several reasons why the philosopher king would not be worried about other people insulting them, because he doesn't care about attack from without.
Right.
He knows what's the right thing to do, and he sticks by it. But for the developing mind of the democratic individual, they cannot see how one could take this insult and still walk around with it. Maybe this is a defect in the philosopher king, is that they are not man enough to stand up for what is,
right.
To stand up for themselves, not what is right, but what for themselves. So they're like, that's never going to happen to me. I'm going to be, no one will be able to do this to me. And but you don't do that by putting other people down. You just do that by doing more and more of the thing that you're meant to do, not for the sake of just doing it, but for the sake of, I'm going to get accolades for it, and then I'm going to be powerful because of that. At the same time, you start accumulating, you start getting the accoutrements of being an honorable guy. You have your wealth, you have power, you have influence, and so those things, you start holding on to those things. Then what happens when you're an oligarchic man? How do you devolve into that? You take this democratic man who believed in honor and served for honor, and now this democratic man's son watches as, because of twist of fate or quirk of fortune, this democratic man ends up meeting dishonor and loses everything.
Yeah,
this happens all the time. Where things happen where you could lose your honor, and once that happens, there's a fall from grace per se. All of the storehouses of wealth and all that's gone, and now one is impoverished. And in an oligarchic system, when one is impoverished, if you're impoverished, you have no representation. You're living at the outskirts of that republic, somehow trying to fend for yourself and make your way through. This person, as he watches his father go through that, comes to understand that honor is useless. Honor means nothing, because it could just take it away from you like that. What instead is more important is money. The person who has money has power. And so then starts this process of trying to amass money, but not just amass money, not spend it either. You want to hold on to as much of it as you can. So this aspect, so now you can imagine this faction has widened, right? First you had the philosopher king who was told by whose son is people tell him, hey, listen, your father doesn't stand up for himself. You make sure that doesn't happen to you. And now you have people who have completely just destroyed the father's legacy. And now one is basically looks at these people and they're like, they were more powerful than my father, but not because they were more honorable, because they had more money. Now I need to be like them and not like my father at all. And so now you start accumulating this money. So you make this appetitive or money-making element, not the honor-seeking guardian element, but the appetitive auxiliary element, the ruler, and now the rational element and the spirited element now are secondary to it.
Yeah.
It's like the triangle is kind of flipped to one side. It's fallen on one side, where the rational now is at the base with the spirited, and the money-making is to the top.
Yeah, here's the quote. It says, Socrates says, and I suppose he makes the rational and spirited elements sit on the ground beneath it, one on either side, and be slaves. So essentially, the rational and spirited element essentially becoming slaves to the appetitive
You won't allow the first to calculate or consider anything except how a little money can be made into more. Or the second that's spirited to admire or honor anything except wealth and wealthy people, or to love being honored for anything besides the possession of wealth and whatever contributes to it. I tell you that, man, this is life. This is current life. I mean, everything that I've heard, till recently, or that I paid attention to or understood to be the right thing to do was this.
Yeah.
No, not a single endeavor.
So, right. And so you're...
not a single endeavor that was ever told to me to do was... So why to be a doctor? Or because you have honor, right? The democracy. But not just that. Forget honor. If you're an impoverished doctor and you're honor, no one... that's not what your parents want you to be a doctor, or society wants you to be a doctor, because you get paid really well to do it.
Right. And now I'm realizing that I should rethink the word honorarium. But so you're bringing up this concept here that I think is interesting, and it's something that I was rolling around in my mind as I read this. You're saying that, and I would agree that I'm in the same situation. This is just sort of the way you were told. Like, this is what you should do. Right?
This is what you see around you, too.
It's what you see around you also. But notice that there's this father-son analogy.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes I'm reading this and I'm like, I am the father and the son.
And the son, yeah.
In some situations. Yeah. Because I've gone through transitions knowingly or unknowingly, where I've just sort of had a frame shift and been like, well, now here I'm just going to focus on accumulating wealth. Or here I'm gonna do what's right for me. There's sort of like this strange rationalization for egocentric or driven behavior. But I was curious as to whether the father-son analogy, if you felt it was obligatory, something father and son being sort of like the society and then the citizens that come up within the society with new ideas, or whether this is something that happens at the individual level as well. And I think it's something that happens at both.
Yeah, but we discussed this last time. The thing that I don't necessarily see, I mean, there has to be a reason why this is written this way. But I was never a philosopher king. In order for me to devolve into a democratic being and then devolve into an oligarchic being, there was tyranny in my mind. There was democracy in my mind. And at best, what I've been able to achieve so far is basically this oligarchic state where I find myself, where if you have money, you have status. That's the life I'm leading. That's the life I see around me. Everybody, that's what they talk about. You want to do something? Well, how much money are you going to make out of it? Right? Well, who's talking about altruistic endeavors?
But I mean, there has to have been some form of altruism. I mean, there's had to have been some degree, right? There's some ennobling aspect, to a medical life, right? To a medical career.
I'm fine.
That isn't to say that it's the only thing, and very often it's something that maybe diminishes and almost goes away completely as you traverse the arc of your career in the profession. But there's got to be something.
Yeah, but then that's the triangle in which the spirited element sit below the money making element. Yeah, you want to do an altruistic thing, but you're not doing it, with no regard for money.
Right. So there's kind of there's an entanglement there.
It's not an entanglement. The money making sits on top. The rational spirited elements are firmly at the base.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves, man.
That's what I'm saying.
Anybody who says I got into medicine just because I was altruistic.
Only because they were altruistic.
Only because they were altruistic. Altruism first and the money making second.
Yeah. Right. But then you can't ignore...
I don't believe it.
Yeah. But then you can't ignore the cultural aspects also, right? I mean, most of us live in cultures and societies that...
We live in oligarchies.
Oligarchies, right. Yeah. So we're doing exactly... Right. What's expected.
So that's why I don't think the city-state, say we lived inside of, this aristocracy, this philosopher king society, and then, we all just did what we were supposed to do because that was the right thing to do. What is achieved there?
Right.
It's by default. If you live... it's so easy to blame the oligarchic society for what is.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying you are saying that. I'm saying that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
What else am I supposed to do, man?
Yeah.
Is what we say.
Yeah.
I've heard this so many times. I hear you. I hear your point about the common good. But you see the world around.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. If anybody is listening to you talk about the common good, it's because you come from a position of status.
Yeah. I think that's the street level, that's the realpolitik of all this.
It is. I mean, the reason why anybody is even going to listen to this is because you and me have some status in life. And so you see how this works. Like, we had to achieve this. This is such a, it's such a, how do you say, like a conundrum, not a conundrum, it's a paradox. That you have to get to a certain point for even your words to be heard. But then that's why I feel like this endeavor is more for, what is this endeavor? To read the Republic and to discuss the Republic and try to make it available to somebody else through our lens.
Yeah.
Is actually, I find it's more of, there is more bang for our buck to be able to critique our own lives and just say it aloud, as opposed to render this to a third person who may listen to it only because we have some status in life. That it upends the book. I mean, Socrates had no status inside of the Athenian Republic. You see what I mean? Right. I mean, he was unwashed, poor, and he was going about trying to talk about ethics and virtues. And guess what happened?
Well, he was a gadfly. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh shit, here comes Socrates!" Like,
who's this guy? Right? They don't want to pay. He talks about this, right? He talks about the fact that he went up to the elite. He went up to the doctors, after the elites. First he went to the elites, political elite, and they had no idea what justice was. Then he goes to the doctors, then he goes to the poets. He goes to all these guys, and nobody knows what justice is. Then they get mad because he accosted them. Their honor was called to question, and so then now they want to put him to death because of it. This is the apology what we are talking about, right? And so we are nowhere close to that, right? But if we are the doctor that Socrates approaches and says, "Tell me, man, what do you know about justice?" And instead of saying, who the hell are you to question us, we actually sit and look back at him and say, "You're right. I have no idea what justice is. What the heck am I doing here? Being a doctor, like, I need to change my ways." That's who we are, right? There is an assailing of our republic from without, but good fortune is that it turns out to be a just assailing. You see? Yeah. And our republic crumbles, and we create from the ashes and the dust, we create something for ourselves. But how did we get to... We create a timocracy from oligarchy. We create an aristocracy from the timocracy. But that is our process of going from tyranny to...
And that was going to be my next line of questioning, because with the father-son analogy, right, there's a generational implication that it goes in one direction, right? The son can never become the father in this analogy. But in many ways, that's precisely what you do when you educate yourself. There's sort of a transgenerational regression, or whatever you want to call it, back to some ideal state, right? And there has to be something motivating that. And I think that's what you're thinking, because I think most of us, you and I included, have lived lives of oligarchic and timocratic thinking. And we're embedded in an oligarchic and timocratic, societal milieu. But then what happened? Something happened to both of us. We were in these, right, deformed republics, and we suddenly found ourselves like foreigners. There was something about, we're foreigners. We're not citizens of these. There's something not right? There's something not fulfilling, and those are sort of the ingredients, sort of the poison that led to kind of like moral injury and burnout, and sort of this overall sense of dissatisfaction with the whole endeavor and disillusionment, right? And I think that's what motivates it. I think that's what motivated me to read philosophy and look back into this and realize that, yeah, most of the decisions I made in my life were completely uninformed. I had no idea what justice was. I had no idea what the right thing to do was. I had no idea how to even start contemplating such a question. And so I think it's, I think for us, a chance to rewrite our own constitutions. I mean,
Making our path from tyranny to aristocracy is a life well lived. You see, most of us make it to an oligarchic state, and we call that a good life. You see? And then we say, oh, the few of us who are lucky become democratic. They did it for honor. They have all this honor, and everybody honors them and say, oh, look at this person.
That's right.
But each of those stages required a crisis moment, a reordering of thinking. When you're a young man, you see it. You see it inside of yourself that if you have no money, you're nobody. You see it all around you.
Yeah.
There is a point of time in life when then the penny drops. You're like, man, you need money. You see this guy, he gets treated differently than this guy.
Yeah.
The difference is this guy has money. I want to be like him. I want that car. I want that house. I want that stature. You see that a poor man works for a rich man.
Yeah.
And the poor man gets treated unfairly. Or not unfairly, but I don't know if it's treated unfairly or not, but gets treated differently. And you don't want to be the poor guy. Nobody looks at that situation and says, you know what, I want to be the chauffeur.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the man sitting in the back with a cigar.
Right. Well, that's the thing. As soon as you become aware of status, then the ground, the stage is set for ambition.
Right. That is you seeing your father.
Because before then you were blind to status.
Yeah,
status meant nothing until you had been passed over for something, or until you saw somebody drive by in a Mercedes, that kind of thing.
You see comparisons.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, I think comparison is a big part of it. Yeah.
You see the comparison. And once you do, you cannot unsee it. And then you immediately look around you. Everybody says, oh, yeah, man, that's the right thing to be. Are you kidding me? You don't want to be the chauffeur. You don't want to be the guy shining the shoes. You want to be the guy who has the shoe to shine and has the car, who owns the car. You want to be the rich industrialist. You want to be that guy. Right? And then eventually when you get there, you just don't want to be the rich guy who has the money and the car. You want to be the rich guy, the money and the car, who's also supporting altruistic endeavors and doing all of those things. Why? Because they can put your name on a building.
Right.
Everybody has money.
Yeah.
What makes you stand apart? What's going to make me put your name on the building? Did you give money towards cancer research?
Yeah.
So that's the democratic guy. Right?
Yeah.
So going the other way is where we are going. And unfortunately for most of us, we get stuck in this oligarchic state because we are not willing to part. This is the thing. People are not willing to part with their money for altruistic endeavors. They say, forget honor, man. I want to hold on to money. You hear that all the time. You have enough money to boot, right? But you won't put it towards an altruistic endeavor. Yeah. Because who cares about honor? Honor lies in money. Right? The more money you have, the better it is.
Yeah.
Now, some of those guys who have so much money or whatever, there's like, we can put some towards this honor business, put our name on a building, whatever. But again, coming back to the Republic of the Mind, I think that is where I find myself in these different stages. I find myself in the stage where you want to hold on to as much as you can for yourself.
Yeah.
And so going forward, then they say, what happens to a person like this, right? Who has the appetitive element ruling, and then the rational, the spirited element kind of
underfoot.
That's right. That's the oligarchic person. They attach the greatest importance to money, and he only satisfies the necessary appetites and spends nothing on other things, right? So there is a way kind of drawing back of the appetite. It's not that, unlike temperance, which is detachment, one has the appetites, but they are withholding it. You see, I want buy that yacht, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to spend the money to do it. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they make a profit from everything. And then this is inside of this person's republic, there is the few that hold power, the money-making part. The rest of the city is in ruins. And there are evildoers there. And those evildoers, though, are kept in check. There is evil inside because of the mind of the oligarchy. You see? But they're kept in check. They're kept in check just because of the fact that you still, despite the fact that one has created this situation where there is a few with a lot and many with nothing. Even for the few with the lot, in order to interact with one another, there has to be a little bit of credibility. You see what I mean? Like, one has to be able to transact, and that transaction requires a certain status that is clean. So one cannot be indicted for fraud and then expect to be able to, not just indicted, but found guilty of fraud and then expect to get money for the next endeavor that they have. So they have to keep their nose clean in all public contracts. You see? Yeah. It's like the physician who is making sure that, they have nothing to tarnish their license. But at the back of their mind, they have these appetites of all the things that they want to do. Ways to siphon money away, way to defraud Medicare, or get rich quick schemes through opioids or whatever, right? Now I think it's semaglutide. Now I think it's the next get rich quick scheme. Selling that out of the back of your trunk of the car. You're not doing those things not because you that they won't even cross your mind. You don't do it because, it's going to tarnish my reputation as a physician. That's how I make the money. So that's why I won't do these bad things. Yeah. You would do them. If you are in a situation where nobody is watching, you would do it. He says that. He says they're forcibly kept in check by this general cautiousness. And where would you find the evil kind of coming out? In situations where they have ample opportunity to do injustice. Yeah. Like when they are guardians of orphans.
Orphanages, right. Yeah.
Right. What that means to say is like when society has turned its face from certain people or certain parts of society, those places you will find these evildoers going there and doing whatever they want. Exploitation of other things, of other people. I mean, I have terrible examples of this, and I don't think we need to give it, but we see it, right? We see a lot of rich people do terrible things. I mean, man, like the slave trade had people who physically went and enslaved people in Africa and brought them over. Like, they were it was just terrible. But there were a lot of people who bought shares of those companies and made money on that. You see? When nobody's looking, there's terrible things that you would do.
Yeah. I mean, that's what integrity is. That's sort of like doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. Right. And
an oligarchic man cannot be somebody who has integrity.
Yeah. And so what I'm realizing is, in history, there's rife with examples of people doing terrible things. But notice that there's always a attempt to rationalize it somehow. And I think this goes back to the idea that nobody knowingly does evil.
That's right.
Right. Everybody's sort of convinced that they're doing the right thing. And I think in situations where people arrive at a decision where they choose to profit from something that's questionable, there's a cognitive dissonance that kicks in. And so then there's this process of what you're trying to do at that point is realign the three elements of the soul. Like, I'm doing this bad thing. At some level, I know this is bad or this is questionable at best. But in order to feel better about it, I must still align the soul to make it seem like the rational principle is still in charge. And that, I think, is the ultimate challenge in situations where you have a degradation of the republic of the mind, because the challenge is when you have appetitive elements, and they talk about that, right? I think that's what he means specifically about the appetitive element putting the spirited element and the rational element underfoot. It's more than just putting them underfoot. It's the appetitive element putting on the uniform and crown of the rational element. And there's sort of like this self-delusion that happens, this rationalization that happens.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Another way just to say it is, I like that. I like the picture that you created, the image of the money-making element putting on the crown and the robe of the rational element. Another way to look at it is the reason why the rational principle is the one that understands the difference between good and evil, right? And chooses good over evil. Understands that what it should fear and not fear. What is true evil and what should be feared. That injustice should be feared, right? Mm-hmm. Impoverishment should not be feared. But the money-making part is not inside of an oligarchic mind. That is not the rational principle of the difference between good and evil in that situation is being determined by the money-making element. And what is good? Good is being rich. What's evil is impoverishment. You see?
Right.
It is a bastardization of what it is to know the difference between good and evil.
Sure.
It's a bastardization of wisdom. There is no wisdom there.
Mm. But I agree with that. But I still think there's still a shifting of position at that point.
There is, right?
There's right. It's still wealth seeking. It's still money.
It is.
It's still money making.
But the reason why money is thought to be, because money is thought to be good. Mm-hmm. You're right. Like there is no. It is not that they know making money is bad, but we are still going to do it.
Right. But there's still a psychological handling of that goal as if it were the rational principle.
Yes, they think that. I mean, that's how we think, right?
Yeah.
What is good? What are goods in life? Right. The goods in life is big house, big car. Right. All of those things are goods in life. Mm-hmm. And what is bad? The opposite of all of those things. Right. And so we like to believe that that's how everybody thinks. And that's what our rational principle is like. And what Socrates is so eloquently, or I should say Plato has brought forth, is the fact that is not. If one is thinking that way, that person is unwise.
Yeah.
So that's the oligarchic man. The oligarchic man is unwise. So is the democratic man is unwise. But there's a difference there between a democratic man and an oligarchic man. And think about it, like these are still considered to be better than the next two that are coming on.
We still have two more.
It gets worse.
And believe it or not, the next one, which is worse, is democracy.
That's crazy, man.
But yeah, I think, and we'll do, I'll kind of do a run through on the next episode, but really the seeds of the downfall of each republic are described in each republic. So, we've talked about democracy and then essentially the undoing, right? The seed of undoing was when it becomes money and social status become intertwined. Essentially, social status becomes monetized. And the seed of undoing of oligarchy is this fragmentation process. And with that fragmentation process actually leads to conditions where you can have now potentially a revolution.
Yeah.
And so this will be a good place to stop and talk about what happens in the aftermath of a revolution from an oligarchy. Mm-hmm. And we'll go from there.
Yes, sir.